So you have water?
People go to the atrium. Your wife giving instructions. Welcome. We're so excited to have you all. That's very green. If you all need a water break or a restroom break, we've got water cups on the table over here. They are color changing. Don't be alarmed. The water is not actually purple, okay? We have very clean, safe water here in Fort Worth. But the restrooms and the water are back
Looking for
down
water.
in the beautiful main atrium. They're going to be along
Perfect.
that
Thank you so much.
wall down and to the left. If you need to, we will keep one door open the entire class. So if you need to excuse yourself for a phone call, break, water, bathroom, please help yourself. No big deal. We're all okay. So my name is. I'm sorry. I'm Susan. I'm Kate. Oh, please. My name is Kelsey, and I am one of the water conservationists for Fort Worth Water. It is my privilege to introduce you guys to new speakers tonight and a whole new topic. We are so excited. So I just have a few announcements, and then I'll dive into trivia. For those watching at home, if you come in person, you can do trivia with us and get some sweet prizes. Okay, so please remember, we are going to be doing trivia and giveaways followed by 2 presentations tonight. Did you guys know you got a 2-for-1 deal? What? I love it. I know, it's so exciting. Please silence your cell phones if you have them right now. If you're like me and a type 1 diabetic, turn down that insulin pump right now before it gets too late. At the end of both lectures, there will be hopefully time for questions. So write your questions down. You have notepads and pens up here if you have any. Write them down, and we'll try to save all the questions for the end of class. If you are watching online, hi mom and dad, make sure you save your questions. You can actually type them to us, and we'll be able to ask the guys. We will also provide the contact information for our speakers. So if you go home and have a question, or don't get to ask it tonight, you will still be able to get a hold of them, okay? Keep in mind that for all of our upcoming seminars, there are really pretty little QR codes and schedules on your tables. In addition, you can always come visit our world-class website, savefortworthwater.org. Please keep in mind that here Fort Worth residents can sign up for free toilets, free irrigation evaluations, our free smart repair program, which provides up to $3,000 of free plumbing repair for our low or fixed income residents. And you can check for leaks that way. Please make sure you follow us on Facebook if you're watching us on Facebook. We are so excited. We're also on Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter. Okay, so I'm going to jump into trivia. We're going to kind of rapid fire these so I don't hold these gentlemen up tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about tonight's topic, mushrooms, and next month's topic, aggressive sprinkler repairs. So, may I please have your attention? On your table is either a duck or a water droplet, because some of our ducks flew the coop last month apparently, and some came back miraculously, so we're thrilled. So, I'm going to ask a question to the entire room for those here in person. The first one at your table to grab the duck or water droplet and hold it up, you get to answer the question. I'll give you instructions if a question requires a certain kind of answer. And of course, the prizes are, get excited, our brand new Arctic hot and cold, Fort Worth water conservation mugs. Sorry, I'm going to touch it before we give it to you. But look at the, when they say to do, save water, grow native, and drink coffee. So here you go. And are they machine washable? Yes, they are. Make sure. We've got 2 kneeling garden stools. These are $55 value at your local garden store. And we've also got a new combo kneeler sitter stool from Fort Worth Water. So these are your prizes for tonight. So get pumped. Here we go, people. I missed you last month, so we got to make up for this. Okay. We're going to start with sprinkler question. The first patented lawn sprinkler was developed in Buffalo, New York by Joseph Lesser in what year? And I'm going to say closest to the 10, so like 1900, 1910, 1920. So what year was the first lawn sprinkler developed in Buffalo, New York? Duck it, let's hear it.
1940.
Earlier. Earlier than 1940.
1920.
Earlier than 1920.
1860.
to water only how many days of the week maximum? Hold your water droplet. 2 days of the week. Look at that. Amazing. 2 days of the week, people. Why is that important? Because starting officially 12 days ago, the city has started fining people. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry, that's us. Sorry. Twice a week, and you don't have to hear from this aggressive person on the phone. Okay, back to mushroom trivia. Get your ducks ready. Get ready to fight for your droplets. Here we go. Please just don't tell them that these are wrong. These are from the internet. Mushrooms are neither plants nor animals, but they are very much living. While members of their own kingdom, altogether, they're fungi. Fungi, we'll figure that out later tonight. Are mushrooms genetically more closely, though, related to plants or animals? Animals. They are more closely related to animals. We have humans specifically have almost 50% of the identical DNA to the fungi. There's your fun fact for today. Okay, coming up. Yeah, you get to fall asleep thinking about that tonight. Okay. The largest living thing on planet Earth is not a whale, contrary to popular belief. So, be as specific as possible. What is the largest living thing on Earth? Someone say a tree. It's not a tree. That's close. It actually murders trees.
It's the fungi system that runs through Crystal Falls.
Da-da-da! Wow! Okay. Whoa! You guys have some competition for some
Good job.
Anyone who didn't hear wow! That's so painfully specific. I loved it. So the largest living thing on planet Earth, one singular organism, is called the honey fungus. Oh, its name is just, it freaks me out. Okay. It's found in the northwest U.S., specifically one organism spans 3.8 kilometers across a section of the Oregon Mountains, but it is primarily underground. Can you imagine the scientist who had to pull the dirt away and just track that? So, great. Want to come and grab some? Honey fungus, there's your fun fact. Not the whale, save that for trivia when you all are out later this month, okay? Okay. Last question. I know you all are pumped. I'm going to say chaga mushroom. That might be the chaga. You guys can tell me. Is the world's single greatest source or most potent collection of what resource that humans and animals need? Ooh, on that kind of track. She said vitamin D. Kind of on that track.
You got
The chaga mushroom.
over there to your left. Should get it.
It's not water. That's a great guess, though. Not vitamin A. You're all think a little bit bigger than individual vitamins. What are those groups called? They fight free radicals.
Yes.
Antioxidants. So eat your mushrooms, y'all. You want to stay young? You want to look 18? Eat those mushrooms. And boy, do we know some guys who can help you eat those mushrooms. All right. Thank you to our winners. If you guys can give them a round of applause.
Good job.
Okay, so without further ado, in 2018, Texas Fungus, the greatest search result I've ever had, began humbly in a one-car garage attempting to achieve proof of concept that the DFW market for fresh specialty produce could support a small amount of weekly produce. Demand rallied quickly when chefs and restaurants saw the local quality available, and Texas Fungus quickly grew into a 2,000 square foot warehouse. Today, Texas Fungus, I'm not insulting, this is their name, grows 1,000 pounds of weekly fresh organic specialty mushrooms utilizing 3,500 square feet of concrete and vertical grow space. Their mushrooms are consumed all across DFW restaurants and grocery stores, and here today is the production captain, Troy and Jordan. And so Jordan's going to be up first, okay, guys? So please welcome Jordan.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate y'all having us out. We're talking about one of my favorite subjects tonight. So hopefully at the end of the night, it will be one of your favorite subjects as well. But yeah, she's right. We started in a one-car garage in uptown Dallas and just kind of went with it from there. And now we're actually in the process of expanding again. So it's a lot of fun. We don't get a whole lot of time outside the farm to come and do things like this. So when Kelsey reached out, I was like, yeah, absolutely. We're coming in, no problem. So we put together a couple different slides. Mine's going to go over kind of who we are, the water conservation in producing a pound of food, because we do grow raw produce. It doesn't look like a farm in the traditional sense, but I've got some videos that we're going to go over, and you'll get to see just exactly what we're talking about. So on to the next slide. So introduction about us, we are a small operation, been growing since 2018. We have a team of 4, so you're looking at half of our workforce right now. So on average, each person is responsible for growing 250 pounds a week. Overall, really, truly what we want to do is bring down the price of produce. Food is at an all-time high, and I don't want to see Texans not being able to afford raw food. Starting at the bottom left, those are oyster mushrooms. Just to the right of that is lion's mane, and then the one in the center is coral tooth, and to the right of that are called chestnuts. And then at the end there is maitake. So those are the 5 that we grow consistently, week in, week out. But we also grow other species like reishi, shiitake. Every now and then we'll try like black pearl shimofuri or nameko. And one that we are going to go after is cauliflower, which I don't think many people in this room have probably seen. Maybe you've probably seen it since you knew where the longest strand of mycelium exists, but that's Spiraceus crispa. So now we're going to dive right in. So if we get too nerdy, I think I'm in the right room with a whole bunch of nerds, so it should be fun. How you doing? All right. So this is the mushroom life cycle. So at the very top there, you see where it says inoculation, right? So those are 2 spores. So spores are asexual, genderless little beings, and once you get 2 spores together, you now start to form hyphae. Moving down, once the spores germinate, that hyphae becomes mycelium. So it's multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, and then once the mycelia expands, it creates this hyphal knot. Once this hyphae is starting to grow and consume nutrients, it's wanting to form a mushroom, especially when its life cycle is threatened. So that's really what we are. We're kind of mycelial manipulators, so to speak. We coerce the mycelium to doing what we want it to in order for it to produce the mushroom that we get to enjoy. So if you take a look through the cycle here, so the hyphae is being formed, and now we get primordia, or what we call little pins. So these are like baby mushrooms. So when you get a temperature drop, CO2 drop, and then really high humidity, primordia starts to form. That's kind of like the perfect storm for this mushroom to begin its life, to create fruiting body selection. Now as it's growing, and this happens all over, with different species. Does anybody also, I want to ask, does anybody know how many species of fungi there are? No one? So you got an idea? I saw, don't. 300 species. Yeah, fantastic guess. I'll tell you, a lot more than 300. So there's about a little over 24,000 species of fish, of just fish. There's over 100,000 species of fungi. And that includes mold, bacteria. No, not just mushroom, but it's all wrapped up in there. But under the fungi kingdom. Yep. So I always ask this question, especially when I showed this diagram. It's a really kind of interesting one. I'm going to ask you, Miss Urologist, which came first, the mushroom or the spore?
Should have been the spore, but
Well, if the spore came, it came from a mushroom.
okay, true.
So which is it? It's kind of a trick question. We don't really know. We honestly, we have no idea. My hypothesis, maybe it came from a meteor from outer space. And there was a piece of mycelium there ready to go. But, so this is essentially how all mushrooms grow. So at this current moment, it takes about 1,800 gallons of water to produce a pound of beef. And with mushrooms, it's significantly less, right about 1.8 gallons. That research study was coordinated by Cornell in their small farms program in 2017. And that does apply to button mushrooms. Those are your white button, cremini, portobello. Just like any crop, there's commodity and there's specialty. So we grow all the specialty, weird varieties that you just will never see in an average day. Very low, I wouldn't say cost of production, but as far as your inputs, what we like to do is we take waste materials, so cottonseed hulls, sawdust, wheat bran, soybean hulls, a lot of these products that a lot of people just throw away, farmers will toss off. Mycelium just wants to consume nutrients, right? That's why, who answered, was it you that said they're more closely related to animals? Right, do you know why?
No, I don't.
They inhale oxygen and exhale CO2 the same way we do. And they just want to, that's why that strand of mycelium is over 3 kilometers long. It just wants to keep spreading, keep growing, keep consuming nutrients. Pictured down here on the left, this is what we call a box of our chef's mix. So it's just a little bit of everything in there, and that's what generally goes out. That's actually our most popular box, that we sell. And it's really pretty. Once people see it, it's like, holy cow. So, are mushrooms the ultimate superstar? I think so, but I'm a little biased. But mushrooms can be cultivated in vertically integrated, controlled indoor settings, and that's why I love, and I tell people every day, we grow 100% on concrete. There's no dirt, but we produce 1,000 pounds of food because we can grow up instead of just flat, So typically grown indoors, mushrooms need minimal, if any, pesticides, herbicides. We don't use any. The 2 cleansers that we use are Simple Green D, Pro 3, and we do a tiny amount of bleach, and that's mostly just for our floors. And then we spray with Sanidate in a low dilution, and that's it. The rest of it, you have nothing to clean off. You don't need to dunk them in water, rinse them off, or anything like that. They're ready to go. They're ready to eat. Like I said, they thrive on substrates often regarded as waste from other agricultural processes. But also, you can raise a pound of mushrooms in less than 4 to 12 weeks, just depending on the species. So like oysters, that's our main crop. It takes about 4 weeks from start to finish for us to grow that. Shiitake, on the other hand, it likes to take its sweet time, and that will take about 12 weeks. So the shiitake that we just moved into our fruiting room, which you'll see later, we started that in December 22nd, So mushrooms are on that line where you do need to crop and forecast out what you're planning to harvest. Yes, ma'am?
You said that it takes 4 weeks for the oysters from start to...
That's from spawn inoculation to harvest.
So that includes the spore, like collecting spores and then inoculating
No, no. So when you have spores, so spores and mycelium are similar, but not the same. So a lot of spores that have grown and germinated and created hyphate become mycelium. So have you ever walked around in the woods and you lift up a tree branch and you see this white fungal root matter that's growing? That's mycelium of some kind of fungus, right? But that's already been when spores have colonized that area, and now they start to grow up underneath it. Usually you'll see this after periods of heavy rain, which also in Texas, does anybody know what a morel is? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. It's, yeah, get ready, because it's on right now, in Texas at least. What's that? $80 a pound. Yeah, I would stay away from that, but too rich for my blood. But mushrooms are also rich in vitamins, vitamin D, high in protein, for something that doesn't have four legs. And we should all really be consuming them, as long as you're not allergic. It's another part of that food group. If you want a balanced diet, you should really consider adding it to it, even if you don't like it. Some of us grumpy old men were like, we don't need that, just give me meat and taters. But add mushrooms right into it, and there's tons and tons of health benefits.
I've got a question. You said
Please.
they grow vertically.
Yep.
What mechanism do you use to grow them vertically? Is it a tower that you grow out of, or is it string?
So we actually use, have you ever seen like wire racks or like metro racks that have like 4 or 5 shelves on those? We use a lot of those with casters underneath, so that we can wheel them around and move. But I'll show you some videos later, and you'll get to see a better picture of it. So just random fact that I found was that it takes about 1 kilowatt of energy to grow about a pound of button mushrooms. So I went back and ran the last 3 months of our energy usage, and it takes about 1.89 kilowatts to grow 1 pound of specialty mushrooms. And then pictured down here, these are oysters. Actually, that picture was taken by Danny Fregoso Chavez, who works with us at the farm. But he's also a photographer, and a pretty darn good one at that. So I'm going to see how these work out, but they should work out just fine. So what you're going to see here, this is a soil mixer. And this is just water kind of running. Here's how we use water at the farm. So you can see it's just turning and turning and turning, right? So that inside there is hardwood fuel pellets, similar to like a Traeger pellet, but we get ones that are pure oak. So, and all it is it's compressed sawdust. It doesn't quite work as well as sawdust because through the pelletizing process, they essentially come out sterile. So you don't get all of that awesome thermophilic bacteria. It gets sterilized whenever it comes out. So a lot of the proteins are also denatured as well. But we don't have a ton of oak down here in Texas, but we have plenty of pine. When I was getting started trying to find oak sawdust, I had to go, I think, 2.5 hours out to DeKalb and scoop it up myself with a 5-gallon bucket, and there was no guarantee of what it actually was. So, because they had hickory and pine and stuff mixed in, and you could smell the pine, but the oak wasn't as prevalent. So we decided to go with a pellet, which actually turned out to be extremely space saving, because you can get a 40-pound bag of pellets. That's going to be the equivalent of like probably 2 to 3 5-gallon buckets worth of sawdust. So. Also in here is soybean hulls. So the HULLS, so that's the skins off the edamame. And it was funny, I saw a really old invoice the other day of when pre-COVID soybean hulls were at $5 a bag, and today they are now at $15 a bag landed. So this agricultural waste isn't so much a waste anymore. Also we add in a tiny little bit of gypsum just to balance out the pH. We do run on Arlington Municipal City Water. And then one other secret ingredient, so secret I can't tell you. In the middle here, I'm going to show you how we also use water through our misting system. So mushrooms like it cold, wet, humid, and turbulent. So in Texas, we have to create winter 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, inside. Sometimes it can be challenging, but it's a fun puzzle. It's a fun puzzle. So you can see it's nice and foggy. So we want a really fine micron of humidity. You don't want it too fine where it's like steam fog, but you do want the water droplet to be about like 0.6 microns or so.
What's the temperature?
We try to keep it between 60 and 65. Who said that? That was you. Yes. Yeah, about 60 and 65 Fahrenheit.
Are you using like walk-in coolers?
So this room specifically was built out of walk-in cooler panels.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, insulation is your friend, certainly.
So you don't really want to try this in your house because of the amount of moisture, right?
So with that much amount of humidity, right, we're keeping it between about 88 and 95. Eventually, those fine microns and that fog is going to condense, and it's going to go straight to the floor. Currently, we shop vac that water up each and every day because bacteria multiplies in a puddle within hours and hours, right? So if you do it at home, you certainly want to take the filter off the shop vac because you won't need that, and be ready to vacuum it up each and every day. My first room that I built in my garage, now granted, I did it in the cooler months when I started in 2018, was just polyplastic, 2x4 frame, zero insulation, and it looked like a Dexter kill room. So, but it worked. It got us through the fall and winter months, and I was like, holy cow, like people actually like these things. Like maybe I could put more into it, you know? And then this next video I'm going to show you is pretty quick, but this is just steam. So for our substrate, and anytime you want to grow mushrooms, you need to, at a minimum, pasteurize it, right? We ultra pasteurize it. So we're not getting above 212 internally inside each and every grow bag, but we do hit about 200, and then we hold that for about 3 hours. Mostly because that'll kill off all the bad microbes and we keep the good ones. So that's just steam inside this big box, and so we pipe in steam using a sauna steamer. So that sauna steamer, we just rigged up pipe to go underneath it so it rises up from the bottom, sterilizes the bags or ultra pasteurizes them, and we run that for 20 hours. So we don't have an autoclave because in our business park, my landlord said we weren't allowed to have one. We would need like a $5 billion general liability insurance policy instead of a $5 million one because they didn't want us to create a bomb. I was like, don't worry, I got it. I promise. But, so we use atmospheric steaming, so it's just time and temperature, right? A much longer period. If we did have pressure, we could keep it at 10, even 12 PSI, and we could shorten that cycle, extremely, and even use less energy for it. So now I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough on our farm. So this is actually about 6 minutes, a little bit over 6 minutes. What'd I do?
Erase.
I did.
Welcome.
There we go.
If you are watching this, then you are at the Mushroom Water Saving Seminar at WIT. And right now we're going to show you how we grow mushrooms here at the farm. First step is we take these, which are hardwood fuel pellets or just compressed sawdust, and soybean hulls, which are the skins off of edamame, and we mix these two together using this big guy, which is a soil mixer with a pneumatic bagging attachment. So inside this mixer is a ribbon that mixes everything on the inside, and this turns and turns and turns. As it's turning, water comes in over there on that side with a flow meter and a solenoid that travels down through this PVC pipe, and the water disperses into the substrate. As it's mixing and mixing and mixing, eventually it gets fully hydrated. This bagging attachment is where we actually will attach a bag down at the bottom, hit the foot switch, and then this pedal will drop about 10 pounds of substrate and then send it right back. So after we've finished making our bags, we then go to load them into our steam box and we ultra pasteurize them. That is done with this. So this is actually a ramp and a door. So this folds down, this top part swings up, and we wheel in racks into the inside filled with 100 bags on each rack, and there are 2 racks. Each bag weighs 10 pounds, so we cook a 1-ton batch at a time, and we do that 3 times a week. After our bags are finished cooking, they then will go right in to our lab. Before you go into the lab, you need to LSD. After you have LSD'd, you pull our space age door handle, you come right on in. So in here, we have 2 people. One person over here is inoculating and sealing the bag. So they will inoculate it with spawn, where they pour it in by hand, hit the foot switch, seal the bag, and then it goes into another space age piece of technology, which is our tumbler. So this is a gas dryer that's just been fitted with mattress foam and 3M Super 90 adhesive. We use a gas dryer because if there's no heat source for gas, this is only a tumbler, and you can plug it in right up on a 110 plug somewhere over there. So after our bags have been fully inoculated and mixed with the spawn all in, we then go to load them into our incubation room. Incubation. In here is where the majority of the process is actually done. So now we have bags that are colonizing. The mycelium is starting to spread. You can see right there, all these little white spots are the mycelium and all the little grain points. They will spend anywhere between 2 to 5 weeks in here. And then once our bags are fully colonized, they're going to go into one of 2 fruiting rooms. We have one fruiting room dedicated just for blue oysters. It is our main crop. And then in our other fruiting room, we grow lion's mane, coral tooth, chestnut, and shiitake today. And then at our other location in Fort Worth, we grow maitake. So let's take a look in here. So our bags are in this nice, cold, wet environment. A lot of air turbulence coming through. You can see the steam, or not steam, but mist just billowing out, spraying all around. And if you take a real close look, we got some baby mushrooms off in there. These ones are a little bit closer to the finish line. And then since mushrooms generate CO2, we have to exhaust out the air. So these are baby little chestnuts. Look at those guys. These are shiitake. And even some lion's mane. one little coral tooth bag. After everything's been harvested, we then trim off all of the substrate so that you get nice, pure mushroom and anything that you buy from us. No substrate attached, entirely ready to use. A whole case looks like this. And that is 7 pounds of maitake or Grifola frondosa. And then finally, our beautiful product has been distributed all across DFW. So if you ever see this van rolling around, give us a honk.
Cool. So I heard y'all were an inquisitive bunch. So if you have any questions, now's the time. You can let them rip, Tater Chip. You, right here.
What grocers or health food stores do you supply in this area?
So Green's Produce and Plants in Arlington. Central Market off of Lover's Lane in Dallas. And then the Central Market in Plano as well. And then over here in Fort Worth, actually right down the street at Cafe Modern. We've been on the menu there since 2020. And we just started at the Bowie House Hotel at Bricks and Horses a couple months ago. So in this area, that's where we're at.
Are there actually different tastes to them?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. I don't have any samples with me.
Could you talk about some of the different tastes?
Yeah, so like oysters are like really mild, slightly sweet. They pair well with anything. Chicken, pork, beef, all on their own if you want. Shiitake has this like super deep, earthy umami flavor. It's like literally my favorite tasting mushroom. Maitake, it's called hen of the woods is the American term because it tastes like roasted chicken. It is absolutely delicious. Lion's mane has a taste and texture kind of like crab meat, and it's it's absolutely delicious. So if you've only really ever tried like white button cremini portobello, give ours a shot. It'll taste a little bit different, mostly because we pick at about 85 to 90% maturity. So we're not trying to get all the yield, right? Because our reputation as a small business is quality. So that's what we really go after.
So when you harvest, do you put the stuff that came in, do you recycle it and start over again, or do you keep trying to grow?
Yes, so we only get one harvest off of each bag, mostly due to space and on our schedule, we just don't have the room for it. Where that goes to is all kinds of gardeners, a lot of farmers like that make their own compost or they do like no-till, you know. They'll come by. We have even cannabis farmers that come down from Oklahoma and come pick it up, and they love it too. And by the way, did you get a head count on how many people we got?
Yes.
Do we have a final number?
Not yet, because
We have extras?
visitors still joining.
Okay, not a problem. Not a problem. So when we finish, y'all can meet me in the parking lot. I've actually got at least one spent bag of substrate for everybody. If you want to throw it in your garden, we'll give you at least one. So, yes, sir.
Yeah, and this might be a dumb question, but as we're watching the video, you have the 4, 5, 6 different types of mushrooms. At what point in the process is each mushroom made? Like, how do you make the oyster from the chapati to the, what process, where does that, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you determine on your early process which type of mushroom you're gonna make?
So, we just have a schedule, you know. It's like on Wednesdays, we inoculate
Or I think
oysters.
He's asking.
or
How do you tell it? What ingredients?
Oh.
Different spot.
Okay. Sure. So, so a big part of it is spawn. Spawn, you can consider it like seed. Mushrooms don't really have seed because it's a living seed. So spawn can be anything. It can be sawdust, it can be grains. We really prefer millet. So I find the strains that I really like, get them on a petri dish, get them nice and clean, and then I send them to a lab who makes the spawn for us, because Jordan can't do everything, right? And the day that Jordan stopped making spawn for the farm, we started doing a whole lot better. So I contracted them out. I say, hey, I want this strain, this strain, this strain, this strain. And then they send us an individual spawn bag. So what's in that spawn bag is about 6 pounds of millet. Sometimes they'll put some oats, rye, wheat, right? A really small seed, because we want as many inoculation points as possible. So essentially it goes from a petri dish to a 6-pound spawn bag to 400 pounds of substrate. So really the name of the game is just clean propagation, right? So, but each spawn bag can be a different species. So we'll say, okay, 40 bags of blue oyster, that's going on. And then next is going to be 40 bags of lion's mane, So it's just that individual species for each individual spawn bag. But no, great question. Sorry if I didn't clarify that in there. And right behind him, yes, ma'am.
Are y'all still at Cowtown Farmers Market?
We are not. We are not. Yeah. Broke my heart too. Yes, ma'am.
The bags that were on the shelves and getting cold or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
some of them had mushrooms coming out and some of them didn't. Do you have to cut a hole in the top of the bag for them to start growing out, or do they burst out on their own?
No. So that's where we get to control them a little bit. The mushrooms will fruit out of wherever oxygen is exposed. So we just do a simple diagonal cut across the side of it. And then you get about 4 to 5 days of lag time where it's like a shock. It's like, holy cow, what's going on? Let's produce a mushroom because something feels weird here, and to the point that they want to produce spores, right? They're just trying to keep the life cycle going on. So where we make that cut, you'll see them coming right out of that cut. But you could do a square, you could do an X, a diagonal. It's entirely up to you. Yeah, you bet. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any failures? Like, do any bags not, like?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So I'd say the first 2 years that I got started, I got really good at growing trichoderma. Does anybody know what trichoderma is? Okay, any lavender growers out here? You know exactly what trichoderma. Yeah, yeah, green mold, and your common bread mold that you would see. So it's a pretty hard one to kill, but you can manage it to a point. But nowadays, our contamination rate is less than 1%. Yes, ma'am.
Can we buy directly from you?
If you show up at the farm, we will not turn you away. But we tried shipping and keeping an online inventory, and 98% of our business is wholesale. But the TDA doesn't really like it because we don't have a traditional farm stand. We're not even actually in a farming zip code. But if you show up anytime, we're there usually from 7 to 3, Monday through Friday. So come on down anytime. But if we're not there, you can also go to Green's Produce and Plants, and they're open till 8 or 9 p.m. Yes, sir. How much is one of the what? A case? Oh, I want to say oysters, a case is $84. It's a 7-pound case, so $12 a pound. And then the most expensive one is chestnuts and maitake. Those are $16 a pound. And then those are, I think, $112. Shiitakes are $10 a pound. Yeah, so that's actually, on the wholesale side, that's the most cheapest, or more affordable one. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Your address in Arlington?
It's 3201 East Pioneer Parkway.
It's posted for those online, and this class will be available on YouTube, hopefully
Awesome.
tomorrow, but within the week. So we'll be able to link their website. They're all over our Facebook, and we'll post their address for sure. As much info as Jordan wants me to put out there.
Sure. We're on Apple Maps, Google Maps, so if you just type in Texas Fungus, it should bring you right there. But our business park does have a front that's all office and retail, and then the bigger warehouses are in the back. So you'll probably see one of us working in and out, running around. Yes, ma'am.
You said that oysters are your most common product, which I think makes sense given their versatility. How did you pick the other species to grow and for wholesale?
How did I pick them? Man, I just had some chefs that reached out and just said, "Hey, can you do it?" And instantly you say, "Of course I can," you know. And then you give them like you try to grow 100 pounds, but really like you only need 5, you know. So you end up eating a lot until you just go banging on doors and like, "Hey, I've got this great product," and you want it. Yes, sorry, long time arm.
Yes, getting a little tired there. What time of year would you plug trees with chestnut mushrooms? And then also, would it kill a living tree?
A living tree isn't as good of a host as a dead one. I'll say that.
They won't colonize a living tree.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the fall. Fall is best. Mostly just after the leaves have fallen, because then all the sugars are just right back up in there.
Jordan, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
He said, when is the best time to inoculate a tree, dead or living? That's actually how I got started, was growing shiitakes on logs. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Similarly to like lettuce and like broccoli, where you grow it and it bolts and it becomes bitter. Is there a point to where mushrooms do the same thing?
On the second harvest, yes. So the bioavailability is its highest for nutrients in the first harvest. So the first harvest is always the biggest. The second harvest, there's not as much juice left in the lemon,
What's the
right?
lifespan of, what is the lifespan of then the bag, if it's a first harvest and a second harvest?
It'll keep producing. It's very common in like the Netherlands. They grow to get 4 and 5 harvests off of one bag. But by the end of that, they're harvesting like one mushroom at a time, but they're just trying to get as much out of it. But usually the best tasting ones are going to be from the first one. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any plans to go to the Fort Worth Central Market?
Yes. Very much so. Yeah. We plan to go to a lot of HEB stores. Yeah. Yes, sir. I got to you quick this time.
Do you have to have a license to sell to businesses?
No. No, you shouldn't. Texas is really.
Insurance?
Depending on the client, like HEB, for example, they required that we had a $5 million general liability insurance policy. Because if we go on HEB property, slip and fall, we got to be covered on our end, but they got to be covered on their end as well. So that's what they required. But like for our warehouse, they only required a $1 million policy. So it just depends, At some point, it kind of becomes pay to play.
Who required the $1 million?
Just our warehouse landlord.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Her.
Those bags look like they're just sort of normal plastic bags?
So they are polypropylene with a filter patch on there. So we have 2 different kinds of filter patches. One of them is 0.5 microns, and it doesn't breathe as much. Do you know how big a micron is? Very small. 1/10,000th of a centimeter. Yeah. So and then half of that. And then we have a 0.2 micron, and it's a high efficiency filter. It's really hilarious. That's a very specialized, bag. It's got a lot of different kinds of, resins in it mixed in once they extrude it. The largest producer of those bags, or second largest in the world, is located in Plano. And the person that actually created that, remember that circular life cycle chart? The guy who created that was Paul Stamets. Paul Stamets said it was like some talk he gave in 1977, I wish there was a company that made a bag that had a filter patch and we could just grow inside that. And so the owner of that company was listening, and he goes, that would be a unicorn, like a total unicorn of the industry. And that company has since became Unicorn Bags.
So are they reusable, or do you have to get the fresh ones every time?
No, we get fresh ones every time. Because once you've made so many cuts, it's like, are you going to go back through and melt the plastic together on each individual one? That's the only thing that I really hate about the industry, is the plastic bag. There's no way around it. not really. But yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So if you guys only do one crop per bag, and you're giving us bags that might work for 4, if we put them in our yard, are they gonna grow mushrooms?
Potentially, yeah. Especially, so like I've got a small garden at my house, and you'll see even some of his presentation. But yeah, when you get periods of heavy rain or a cold snap, like you'll start to see little buds or little pins popping up, and they'll show up. They certainly will. Yes. Oh, from Facebook. Go.
Online question.
Okay.
So the first question, playing off what Ms. Susan just asked, can you start small? We have a lot of, just home gardeners in the room. Can you, small batch, can you do that? And then playing off that, someone said, you mentioned the CO2 in your rooms. If we do have a little mushroom growth going on at home, do we need to worry about CO2 in our homes?
So, can you start small? Yes. I started off with a Presto 23-quart pressure cooker, and I thought I was hot stuff the day that I went from 2 bags in my pressure cooker to 3. And we're growing at home, and it worked. You YouTube University and you figure it out. And then I just kind of went from there. And that's where I started, was at home. Part 2 of that, yes, there will be a CO2 buildup. So you definitely want to make sure, at least in your fruiting room, that you have an exhaust fan, because you want that to go out of the house. Don't tell my landlord, but when I showed you our exhaust fan, I blew a hole through the cinder block. And that goes straight outside, with all the spores and all. But really, where the highest amount of CO2 is going to be in that incubation stage. When they're just kind of sitting, mycelium is spreading. That's where they put off a lot of CO2. So if we were to probably measure it in that room, it's probably 3,500 parts per million, give or take. But yeah, and that's a silent killer, CO2. But yeah, as long as you exhaust it out, everything's fine.
How often would you have exhausted out?
We leave ours on 24/7, But if you're like just putting one together, you can just keep a small, probably 4-inch fan or so. Like there's a really popular option out there. It's called a Martha tent, and it's big enough to hold like 10 blocks at most. Most people just put a small, even computer fan, just right in there, just so that the air is moving, And right behind you.
If you had just a little operation in your house, would it also help if you had some plants that were real CO2 absorbers, or would that not make much difference?
I wouldn't go, okay, I'll put it to you this way. No one has been able to successfully cultivate mushrooms and plants in the same room, not yet. When you're trying to grow, yeah. But we believe in you. You're going to crack the code. Yes, sir.
In regards, you said a 10-pound bag. Could you go to a smaller bag that's limits the size of, mushrooms? Let's say you went to a 7-pound bag. Like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like ours, each one of those we will produce about 2 pounds off of each bag. So a 5-pound bag will probably be right about a pound. A 7-pound bag, 1.4 pounds, give or take. So if you don't need a whole lot, you can use smaller bags.
And second question, in regards to, how would I realize, let's say if I grow mushrooms and I wanted to grow them to a point where they create spores to be able to recycle, how would I recognize when that mushrooms get to that point?
So as you're getting ready to pick, like these right here, perfect example, this lion's mane. It actually has like these little hairs, right? You can see kind of these individual little hairs that it's starting to form. That's actually where the spores come out of, right out the tip of that. So you have to find a way to capture those spores, right? In a safe way because I do have to say this or give a disclaimer. You want to definitely have a respirator on, right? So PPE for sure. Anytime that you're inside your grow room, because those spores they are trying to colonize inside anything, and they will get inside your lungs and give you a form of pneumonia, you will be taking a steroid every day if you contract that form of pneumonia. We call it spore lung. So definitely be safe. But you can take a spore print. Stupid easy. You get a piece of aluminum foil, a cup, and then that whatever mushroom you want to capture those spores from. You put the mushroom right on that aluminum foil and then cover that, overnight. You'll come back and you'll see like a white or brown, powdery substance. Those are spores. And then from there, you get a scalpel blade. You can scrape them off into like a petri dish. Sterilize some water. You can soak it or pull it with a syringe and then just inject some sterile water in there. And now you've got essentially spore slurry or a spore syringe, and then you can suck it right back up. You can safely assume that one cap has about 1 million spores. So not to get too in the weeds here, but through a series of dilutions where you take, say, 1 mil of you started with 1 million, take 1 million out of that, or 1 milliliter out of that, get it into another 10 milliliters of water. Now how many do you have? Well, take a zero off. Now you got about 100,000. So you can get it all the way down to one single spore. But that's one way to do it. Well, yeah. It's a lot of work. Like the day that I quit making spawn, I gained 28 hours a week. Like it's a lot of work, and it's the hardest part of the operation.
But you all can do it. I have faith in my sweet regulars. I know.
Heidi's gonna do it. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you think about those little boxes from Back to Roots at Walmart that have their mushrooms in them?
What do I think about them?
I can imagine what you think about them, but for somebody that's just wanting to see if it
Exactly. Yeah, I would say.
or whatever, like a science project.
Right. Buy a mushroom grow kit. I got a good friend out in California. He does, or his company is called Mighty Cap Mushrooms, and he makes a really good kit. The Back to the Roots ones they're okay. I actually, part of the reason I got started because one of my friends gave me one of those, and it didn't work. So I called the company and I was like, hey, I did this, I did this, I did this. Why won't it work? And they're like, we don't really have all the time to explain mycology to you, but here's some helpful links. And so I just went on YouTube and, now I'm here talking to you about it. But yeah, I would say buy a kit, try one, and a lot of them you can fruit them out on your tabletop.
Okay.
But when
That was gonna be my next question.
Yeah, totally.
Put it like on top of the refrigerator or something and do it out or not?
I would keep it a little bit more visible.
Okay.
But okay, so CO2, right, is heavier than air. So you don't want it somewhere super low.
Right.
But if you got a bathroom's nice and humid, right? On your kitchen counter, I've even taken like a trash bag, spray it with a water bottle, and then just throw the bag right over it. Now, once you start to see mushrooms coming through, you've got to keep that humidity up, but it wants that airflow. And then if you ever start to see, spores kind of flying around the air, you should pick them and cook them because they do have a field heat, right? So you got to harvest them and then get them cooling down. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up the questions, but again, we'll have some time after Tori goes too, so nobody panic. Okay? Told you they were going to have more questions.
Yeah.
So one of the questions online was, if you don't mind, for those of us trying at home for the first time, small scale, could you talk about some easy mistakes or things homeowners could really avoid kind of easily? Any things you did by accident or we might do by accident, like putting it on the floor? Anything that just pops to mind.
Yeah. So, okay. I'll put it to you this way. You can learn from other people's mistakes or you can learn from your own mistakes. I'm very hard-headed. I had to see it, feel it, fail at it myself. I don't recommend that for most people. Play it safe and be kind of overly cautious about it, right? So if you're handling spawn, here's one thing. the day that when I was using spawn, I would sterilize a spoon because I wanted like consistent amounts of spawn getting into each bag. And the first couple were great. But after the 40th bag and the 60th bag, I never cleaned the spoon in between, right? So when I said that I was contaminating a whole lot early on, that was one of the reasons. The day I got rid of the spoon, it was like night and day. Holy cow. It was like there were so many more mushrooms now. And so that's one thing. Don't scoop, just pour them in. Now you got to have an eyeball for it, but you'll find your sweet spot, you know.
Water, the kind of water to use, you mentioned sterilized water. Someone online suggests everything has to be fully sterilized.
No, everything does not have to be sterile. Early on, yes. So that's why I said buying a grow kit would probably be more beneficial and give you a higher success rate because that's like 90% of the work, right? Now, all we need you to do is take this ball and run to the end zone, you know? So, but if you do buy a kit, just keep it nice and humid, lots of airflow, you'll be just fine. Yes, ma'am?
Would it be better to use distilled water or tap water?
Distilled water.
But we still love tap water.
Preferably RO, if you got it, but reverse osmosis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if that's available, for sure.
All right, I'm going to wrap you up so we
Okay.
can switch. We're going to give you guys a quick 3-5-minute break here. If you need to do a restroom break, we're going to switch speakers.
Yep.
We're going to go into the next topic. Good stretch. Then I'll call you guys back in here. We'll get Troy all set up.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gents.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. There we go. Okay.
Yellow. Yellow. Yellow.
Y'all, this is technology, so this is why I keep Tom around. All right. Troy, give me another test.
Yellow. Yellow. That's working. That's real. Okay.
Okay. Now I was keeping Troy a secret. I have been keeping him a secret because Troy does not know, but this is the most aggressive group of composters you have ever
Oh,
met.
sweet. Very nice. Very nice.
So when I heard that Troy also wanted to speak, I said, oh boy, they are going to lose their minds over this one. So Troy started at Texas Fungus in November 2022 and quickly rose to production captain. Everyone, ooh, we love that. There we go. Troy also manages and facilitates, the organic certification for Texas Fungus. He is a lover of all things botany, aren't we all, and fungi related. With an original background in treatment and counseling, Troy now helps lead the team at Texas Fungus as they grow. So here to talk to us about mushroom composting, Troy.
Okay. So thank y'all everyone for coming out tonight. I guess I'll cover this real quick on the topic of conserving water. I kind of missed that was the initial topic of the whole meeting, but we'll just, in one simple sentence, mulching with mushroom substrate will help keep water on your topsoil layer and many, many, many other things. But I kind of wanted to introduce all of the phyla so I can narrow down the phylum of fungus that we actually work with at our job. So I'm going to butcher all of these names at the top real quick. Citricdiomycota, Blastocladiomycota, Neocalamastagomycota are all single-celled fungi. They are similar in morphology, and they usually are in animal gut biomes. Some are parasites, and then some decompose tiny, tiny organic debris. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess. Is this broadcasting to the room or?
Only going to the phone.
Okay. Gotcha. So Mycosporidia are all single-celled obligate parasite fungi. Some of them are even hyperparasites that parasitize other bacteria or fungi. Some of these down you will probably be more familiar with. So Glomeromycota are the phylum that contains all of the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. So these are some of the oldest fungi on the planet. Some of the oldest fossils that we have for them are 450 million years old, and they exist completely underground. They do not make a mushroom. They make a tiny sac or cluster of spores called a sporocarpus, and these get carried through rainwater and then germinate in heavy moisture and then connect to plant roots. Every fungus in this genus has to exist within plant roots. Then we have Ascomycota. So this holds the majority of all of the fungus that we are familiar with, yeasts, molds, lichens, penicillins, and then even some that we would consider a mushroom, like cordyceps, even though it's technically not. And then at the very, very bottom, we have Basidiomycota. So this is the arguably most well-known fungal phylum, and they make the fruiting bodies that we call mushrooms. These are the most highly evolved phylum, and that's also why they tend to have more novel medicinal compounds that we would be interested in consuming. So going forward, I am just going to read verbatim an excerpt from a book that I'm going to be quoting a lot and that I highly encourage everyone get. It is called Radical Mycology by Peter McCoy. It's basically a series of magazine articles that he compiled studying mushrooms over his time living in Washington. Radical Mycology by Peter McCoy. So first, before we get to why mushrooms are so interesting in terms of composting or permaculture or what have you, I wanted to talk some about how they're actually consuming their food. And it's actually one of my favorite facts about mushrooms because at all times they're actually exploding and oscillating pulses. So the exact mechanism behind this tip building process is one of the most inexplicable aspects of mycelial growth. Most theories on apical extension assume that the tip is dissolved and rebuilt by compounds in dozens of small bubbles or vesicles that cluster at the hyphal apex. While this may be true to a degree, it does not explain many other strange phenomena that occur at the tip. Also, when it's referencing tip, it's talking about the hyphae, so basically the very end points of this mycelium that started growing. Unlike what would be assumed for other eukaryotes, growth vesicles do not arrive at the apex from the compound sorting Golgi apparatus. Rather, they travel from the Golgi apparatus on microtubes to an organelle-like structure known as the Spitzenkorper, which is German for linear body, or basically the point of the mycelium, where they are distributed or sorted and distributed to the tip. The Spitzenkorper is the true architect of a hypha. Taking in thousands of vesicles per minute, it rapidly sorts, processes, and then sprays each vesicle towards the tip interior along thin filaments of the protein actin. However, this is not a random shower as occurs with a paint sprayer. It is a controlled act that precisely places each vesicle evenly across 4 dimensions of hyphal space and time. The rate of this process is staggering, with the Spitzenkorper and Neurospora crassa sending 600 vesicles to its apex every second, or 36,000 vesicles each minute. This particular fungus that it's talking about is actually, we nickname it the farm killer. It is the fastest fungus on the planet. Yeah, it also parasitizes other fungus. This is not a constant process. There is a pulse to it, similar, found in veins and arteries that is demonstrated. Oh, I think I clipped a bit. But talking about mushrooms being similar to humans, they do have a pulse. The slime molds Bithynium and Aphidenturnium. Oh, God, yeah. We're just going to skip saying every single species. But each of these species exhibit frequencies in their growth, with Trichoderma viride and Neurospora crassia holding the fastest pulse, 13 to 14 pulses per minute. Neurospora holding the second fastest pulse, Trichoderma holding the second fastest pulse will become relevant later. So this is essentially how the mushroom is eating. So this little tip at the very end is the hyphae. So if you were to go down on a microscope and watch all of the little lines that are creeping through the wood or whatever it is you're looking at, this is what's happening on the end. So it releases these volatile compounds that explode the actin protein wall and the chitin, and then it releases all of its lignolytic and cellulitic enzymes. So all of the mushrooms that we grow are wood lovers. So when you get spent mushroom substrate from us, it's always going to be some type of nitrogen supplementation and then mostly just sawdust. There are other spent mushroom compost that gets thrown around. Agaricus bisporus is the other common one. That one's usually grown on just actual compost. But these enzymes right here specifically are exceptionally good at decomposing lignin and cellulose. And basidiomytes, the mushrooms we grow, or white rot fungi, are also some of the only organisms on the planet that can degrade lignin and cellulose simultaneously with the same enzyme. Other interesting things about it, some of these enzymes, like manganese peroxidase, are completely unique to the phylum of Basidiomycota. So no other organisms have been discovered making those. So kind of dialing in why white rot fungi can be so useful to compost is basically just their lignin degrading powers. So as Jordan was also talking about, we pasteurize our substrate. We do not sterilize it. So if you get spent mushroom substrate from us, it's also going to have a whole host of endospores, of thermophilic bacteria, and other beneficial microbes that actually attach to the mycelium as it goes about living. And then another interesting thing about these white rot fungi, their chemistry is so destructive that they can take wood and break it down to basically all the simplest aromatic compounds that it can be, and then ultimately degrade it into just CO2 and water, becoming completely mineralized. So this is not actually an example of our substrate. The study I was looking at was talking about growing oysters anagaricus bisporus, but this was the only one that they had a picture for, unfortunately. But not all that different. So if you could replace the straw on the left and the manure on the right, essentially with sawdust as our carbon source and soybean hulls as our nitrogen source, we do the exact same thing, where we mix it together, we hydrate it, we raise the temperature. As the temperature rises, pathogenic bacteria that we don't want will begin to die off, and then thermophilic bacteria begin to rise and thrive in the super hot environment. As this is happening, they also begin an early degradation of lignin and cellulose and actually pre-chew the food for the mushroom, if you will. And then after it's cooled down, thermophilic bacteria die off, their endospores are sitting there nesting and waiting, and then other Pseudomonas bacteria that just kind of live on the mycelium come. These were from 2 studies, basically just looking at the bacteria present in spent mushroom substrate, and it's mostly thermophilic actiniomyces, Pseudomonas bacteria, and firmicutes. So these are the 3 most common genera of bacteria that you will find, genera of bacteria that you will find in thermophilic compost. So one of the interesting things about using spent mushroom substrate in your compost is basically just a pre-charged battery of life that wants to get really, really, really hot. Moving on, this is how the bacteria actually interacts with the mycelium. It increases the actual efficacy and production of the enzymes that it uses to destroy lignin. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you said you could use the spit bags. What is the ratio of the spit bag to...
We will get to that. We will get to that. Yeah, these are just all of essentially the different ways bacteria have evolved alongside fungi, and they help the mushrooms grow. They affix nitrogen. They also fight off other pathogens. So I remember earlier when y'all were talking about growing at home and like sterilization or concerns with that. So sterilized substrate, where we've actually killed all microbial life, is far more likely to contaminate than pasteurized substrate with existing microbial life, because we have friends there to fend off the surface area. So what are you getting if you come get spent substrate from us? So prior to us inoculating it, this is just sawdust and soybeans spinning around in a mixer. It's going to have an approximate carbon to nitrogen ratio of 486 to 1. The spent mushroom substrate, after it's been colonized, and this quote is also, or this number is from substrate that has been flushed multiple times. So this is probably not the exact carbon nitrogen ratio of the blocks that you're going to be getting out in Jordan's truck, but after you let them fruit for a little longer, it's going to get closer to that number. And these 2 numbers also kind of give you an idea of exactly how much of a job the mushroom is doing at degrading those compounds. We treat our substrate with gypsum, so the pH usually ends up being around 6, 6.5. It has all the endospores, thermophilic bacteria, and then another interesting thing about using it like a mulch or just adding it to compost tea or various other things we're going to get to, the mycelial structure is made of chitin. So this is also what like lobster shells and insect exoskeletons are made out of. So because other fungi are also made out of chitin, there can be pathogenic fungi existing in your garden. And if you make compost using spent mushroom substrate, you're going to increase the amount of chitinolytic bacteria that you have that are going to go eat the cell walls of fungi. So you can also essentially use spent mushroom substrate to try and cultivate bacteria to fight off pathogens in your garden. It can also just act as a food source for trichoderma, and then the approximate NPK ratio of composted spent mushroom substrate would be a 2:1:1.
I had a question about that.
Oh, yes.
You said the mycelium is a food source for the trichoderma?
Yes, ma'am.
So that means the trichoderma fungus?
Yes.
Fungus?
Yes. So it is a organic matter decomposer, and it is also a parasitizer of fungi. and yeah, it actually can't, trichoderma does not degrade lignin, so when it's infecting the block, it is pretty much solely eating our nitrogen supplementation that we added, so the soybean hulls, and then the actual mycelium itself. So some of the things, potential applications that I wanted to talk about, using it like a living anti-pathogenic mulch, a compost tea additive, a thermocompost additive and media for cultivating trike, a food source for vermicompost, no-till lawn killer and corrugate consumer, speeding up turning your mulch into humus, and then also living CO2 generators for greenhouses. So one of the easiest possible things that you could do if you came and got spent mushroom substrate from us would to be just break it up and thinly mulch it on your garden. If you are putting it around acidic plants, you do have to be mindful of the gypsum that's in there, or sorry, acid-loving plants. But this was from a study from a Chinese journal that I believe was called it was like the University of Light or something kind of strange. But they were studying the efficacy of using spent mushroom substrate to fight fusarium wilt in cucumbers. So they collected soil from a cucumber greenhouse that had only been growing cucumbers for about 8 years. So essentially rife with the spores of this fusarium fungus. So they did a pot experiment and then an in vitro experiment, and in both showed extremely positive results in terms of killing the pathogens. Sorry. In vitro, all of them died very, very, very quickly. And then I did also include links to all of these studies at the end if anybody actually wanted to go view the nitty-gritty of all that. So making compost tea, one of the other super interesting things about, I briefly talked about this. So there are many phosphate solubilizing bacteria that will occur naturally when making compost tea, but some of these consume chitin and cellulose, which is the mycelium is primarily composed of. So adding spent mushroom substrate can increase the diversity of bacteria inside your tea and potentially decompose a higher array of organic matter to return a wider amount of nutrients back to your soil or inside of your tea. And then also, just a tip, this is something I like to do after making compost tea. The mushroom substrate is much, much softer and easier to break down, and that's typically when I'll feed it to my worms. And then using it as a thermocompost additive. So this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, just because, so covering how the mycelium eats, trichoderma, second fastest pulse in the fungal kingdom, and it also loves room temperature to about 100 degrees. So also very nitrogen hungry, loves acid, but can tolerate not being an acid. So it's a fungus that can thrive very, very well inside of a stinky compost pile with all kinds of, yes ma'am?
Is it considered green or brown? You're looking at...
Oh, I would call it a brown. I would call it a brown, probably. Well, somewhere in between. Somewhere in between. Because, yeah, it is a lower carbon-nitrogen ratio. Yeah. I would treat it as a brown, though, because the way the sawdust breaks down is going to make a lot more spongy humus. So if you were looking to just add, like, mass to a pile, then it's a good way to accomplish that. But, yeah, trichoderma can thrive in these environments. So what will happen is if you can take mushroom substrate that's been infected with trichoderma, which I assure you is also extremely easy to accomplish. It should not be very hard to get trichoderma on it. Half of our job is trying to not get trichoderma on it. So once you've accomplished that by just basically leaving it alone outside and keeping it wet, you can save that and basically use that like an inoculant. So let's say you have like a stinky 5-gallon bucket filled with spent mushroom substrate, green molds crawling all over it. And then about every time you're getting close to starting a new pile that you actually want to bring to temperature, you could take this inoculant that you have, probably wear a mask also, because I'm sure a lot of you are also familiar with this. It's the same green mold that grows on bread or orange peels when they start going bad, and it turns into powder and just starts floating around the air. But you can intentionally inoculate your compost piles. And so because this fungus is so fast and it has a wide diet, it can rip in there, create a lot of CO2, which is going to be trapped inside of your pile. It'll insulate, raise the temperature quicker to a point where eventually it just kills itself off, and then the thermophilic bacteria that have been resting in the substrate can come in and finish the job. I think I saw one question over there. Did I? No, never mind. So, Trichoderma, just as a fungus, is also really, really interesting for plant immune support. So, through a couple different of species, the bacteriolytic and chitinolytic enzymes that Trichoderma releases kill almost every major plant disease that we can think of. There are some people who are trying to make isolates of these enzymes to basically make like organic fusarium wilt spray, or even in like commercial lavender cultivation, as Jordan was talking about earlier, they will inoculate the soil with Trichoderma in order to prevent root rot diseases from coming in. You could also get really gross and maybe make a foliar feed out of Trichoderma or compost tea. But, yes. Oh yeah, and then last thing about Trichoderma. So, compost pile activator can speed up how fast it heats. It can be used for plant immune support. And then lastly, it also helps the soil sphere. And one of my favorite things about it is that it can parasitize nematode eggs. So when I was talking about chitin earlier, insects' exoskeletons made out of the same thing as the outer wall of mushrooms. So for the enzymes that Trichoderma produces, it is really no small thing to just creep through the soil and go eat a bunch of nematode eggs. The enzymes that it produces also make a antagonistic environment to nematodes and can discourage them from traveling towards plant roots. And then because of how nitrogen hungry it is and the speed at which it colonizes, it can also just starve out their food sources. So as a as a vermicompost food source, there's a couple different studies basically just talking about higher NPK ratios or higher nitrogen values in vermicompost that has added spent mushroom substrate to it. And then also the bacteria that are on the spent mushroom substrate can also be used like an inoculant to deter bacteria that you don't want from germinating in your worm bin, basically using those same enzymes from thermophilic bacteria. So now these pictures are from my sneaky little garden. So I had just moved into a new place last summer, so I haven't even been there a year yet, but we got in like June, and I wanted to try and get a garden bed set up real fast out of this weird broken retaining wall that was there. So we wanted to try no-till methods, and then this was my first time using spent mushroom substrate in addition to it. So I'm sure, as a lot of you know, corrugate waste is already just composed of lignin, cellulose, and hemicellulose. So all of the food sources that our white rot fungi want. So grass, cardboard, pretty simple no-till stuff, application of spent mushroom substrate, and then the very last picture is about 4 days into just keeping it wet. And the mycelium has already colonized the cardboard and started to expedite it breaking down. No, now we went too far. Another way you can use it is, so I have a couple other no-till spots that I'm trying to do for some corn, and I've basically just matted the spent mushroom substrate down onto the ground. It is all already recolonized back into itself, into one big single organism, and so it also holds really, really tight. It starts to pull all of that wood and sawdust together into a really, really, really tight, compacted space, which makes it very, very difficult for grass and weeds to grow through it. And then I don't know if you'll have a terribly good view from the board, but if you look closely, you can see that the mycelium has already started to colonize the suffocated grass. So you can suffocate your weeds and then immediately expedite their return to the earth. And then this was that same little patch of grass. About, what is this? This was like a month and a half later. Nothing too crazy to write home about. But this was nothing but spent mushroom substrate, composted spent mushroom substrate, some topsoil, and some mulch. And I was able to grow some pretty sweet potatoes in it. Another interesting way that you could use spent mushroom substrate is maybe you have a mulch pile somewhere in the corner of the bed that's just taking too long to break down, or you want to put something else there, or what have you, or maybe you just think this looks cool. You can also just rip up a block of spent mushroom substrate and till it or push it down into your mulch, and it will absolutely colonize it if you keep it wet. This is basically just, again, another fast way to turn lignin, a very, 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 very hard substance, into plant food very quickly. And then last thing I wanted to talk about, this is probably one of my favorite things. Are any of you familiar with like halo CO2 systems for indoor crop production? It's basically just these big rigs. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars on the tanks and maintaining the equipment to try and raise the parts per million CO2 in their grow rooms. So one mushroom block is, or one of our mushroom blocks, 10 pounds, over a period of about an hour is emitting 2.25 grams of CO2. Depending on environmental factors, this can go up or down. It also does have a peak, so this would be fresh substrate, maximum metabolism going on. And then these blocks also put off about 10 BTUs of heat per block. So one of the crazy things, Jordan was talking about how we fight the weather, something interesting. So even when it is freezing cold outside, 20 degrees outside of the warehouse, the incubation room, where the largest amount of those blocks are, what is it, 1320? 1300?
ppm?
No, blocks, like the amount of blocks.
1200.
1200, oh yeah, 1200 blocks. In the wintertime, we still have to air condition that room because of the amount of heat that is being gassed off from the blocks. So there are a couple people who have taken advantage of this already. There's a company called Exhale, yes, Exhale, that isolated a strain of turkey tail that does not produce a fruiting body. So it will colonize a block and then just sit there for 6 months and do absolutely nothing. So if we're getting a mushroom, not so great, but if you just want a block hanging above your plants, dropping CO2 directly onto them with no equipment, electricity, or upkeep outside of keeping it wet, that can be a really cool thing. So this little image on the side is from our greenhouse. We just got it. It is not sealed yet, haven't finished setting stuff up, but what we did do is the floor is made entirely out of spent mushroom substrate with mulch on top of it. And so this reading was from 2 days ago at like 4 o'clock in the morning, where still in an unsealed greenhouse, we are hitting 1904 parts per million CO2 at some points in the night. So once we can get it sealed and get some inline fans running, we can hopefully keep that regulated and float it in between 8 and 1200. But also, creating that excess of CO2 is not just going to help your plants respirate, but let's say if it's in the wintertime and you maybe want to take it easy on your greenhouse heater if you have one, just piling and piling and piling mushroom blocks, down in the corners and hanging them, that excess CO2 buildup will absolutely hold more heat and maybe give your greenhouse heater a break. But that is all I have for you.
Now, we're going to do questions for both sides. If you still have some, if you all taking pictures, this will also be available online again on YouTube, so you guys will get to see the presentation and the slides. So if you have any questions, ask these fun guys. I don't know what
SMS hoping for nematode control. What's the best? Using it as mixed with compost, strictly as a mulch? You blend it into the soil or put it on top?
So for the nematodes, that one, well, actually, so something interesting. Blue oyster mushroom and shiitake mushroom have also been documented to kill and eat nematodes. Blue oysters is probably the coolest. It has a tiny microscopic grenade that when it gets agitated sends shrapnel, like hyphal shrapnel, into the bug. Yes. And then it germinates from the inside out and then reconnects to the mycelium and it eats it for protein. But trichoderma would probably be the easier means of nematode control. So you would be taking our substrate, letting it get really gross and moldy and green, and then by some means getting that green mold to your soil. So that could also be as simple as just like taking a slice of it and throwing it in a bucket, maybe feed it like a tiny bit of blackstrap molasses or something, like just get some sugar in there, and then you could start a liquid culture of trichoderma in a bucket and then just water your plants with it. And the spores will find their way.
Okay, and when you say the SMS can kill weeds and grass, is it a problem using it strictly as a mulch on top of a garden plot?
You don't want to use a ton because it will absolutely recolonize. Even if you're using different species of mushrooms, typically the one that's going to win is blue oyster. So that's what always happens in my yard, is that I'll have all this substrate mixed up and then eventually it's just giant blue oyster mushrooms coming out of it. But it can compact down on plants. So if there's too much of it used as a mulch that's still alive, the way that it colonizes and kind of pulls everything together as it loses moisture can choke some plants out. If it gets too dried out, it can then also become kind of hydrophobic, where it's so dry that water is just beating off of it and not actually getting to the topsoil layer. So probably thinner amounts that can decompose quicker would be more apt, or mixing it just with some other type of mulch.
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
You spoke of root rot. What's the major cause of root rot in the greenhouse? Is it too much water, or your plants not getting enough air?
If I had to take a guess, yeah, it's stagnant, just stagnant water of some kind.
Knock off on watering, or?
I guess that would depend on the plant or the crop. You're just talking about root rot in general?
Yes, sir.
So I guess in terms of what I've covered, basically the same thing. Trying to take our substrate, intentionally let it get green and moldy, and then by some means getting that green mold into your soil media. And that could be watering or just physically adding it. Dang, no questions for me. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the best way to use the SMS is to mix it up with compost?
Yeah, that's also, yeah, it'll speed up your compost very quickly.
More so than using it straight in any way?
In terms of like mulch, yeah, composted would be better. Yes, sir.
How long would a fully colonized bag last in the fridge?
In the fridge, actually, it's sealed, like probably like 6 months. Yeah, you could keep it in there a while. Yes, ma'am.
Did I miss the ratio for the compost? How much are you actually putting into your compost bins? I have, I think 55 gallons.
55 gallons, and well, that would also depend on.
I'm sorry, 35.
That would depend, I guess. If you're shooting for like the perfect, what is it? Like 30-to-1 is the nice carbon to nitrogen ratio for a hot compost pile. I'm pretty sure. So if you're getting the spent mushroom substrate coming at like approximately 16-to-1, and you wanted to shoot for that, depending on what other materials you're adding, that can shoot all over the place. But there is a really cool website called Urban Worm Academy, and they have a compost calculator. So it basically will just give you a drop-down list of some super common materials, and you can add them all up, and it'll just do the math for you. But you can also compost purely with just spent mushroom substrate. It will come out a little gritty and a little salty if there's nothing else in it.
I have 3 full compost slightly broken down, but I don't think they're getting hot enough.
Okay.
And so, you know, I'm thinking if I put a little bit of this in it, they will.
Yes, yeah. And over time too also, another thing that I could have done a whole slide on. So like let's say the compost isn't getting hot enough and you throw a bunch of spent mushroom blocks in there. They can also they'll colonize whatever. Like especially like blue oyster. If it's got some kind of lignin anything in it, it will colonize it and eat it. So you can also take the attitude of just using the mushrooms to break down all your compost before it goes into your compost so you can compost faster. Basically get the whole array of mineralization. Let no molecule be wasted.
So it would break down, I'm sorry, it would break down like wood chips?
Yes. And also, I will say this, for our spent mushroom substrate specifically, almost everything that we grow loves oak sawdust and other hardwoods like maples or alders or elms. Cedars and cypresses, although I have seen blue oyster just eat cypress, so I won't even count that one. And then like redwoods can tend to have a lot of antifungal properties, so they probably won't colonize all wood chips, but like hardwoods, deciduous hardwoods you're typically safe with.
And just one more question, I'm sorry. I have chickens. Sometimes I let them play in the compost bin. Will this do anything?
No, some people actually feed spent mushroom sub just straight to their chickens.
Really?
Just
They'll pick through it.
yeah,
They'll throw it everywhere.
Really? Okay. I'm a new chicken owner, so.
okay, sweet.
Can you repeat what she was saying? I couldn't hear.
Her?
Yeah, in your answer.
Oh, so she was asking if she could feed it to her chickens, or if her chickens pecking at it would harm them in any way.
Oh, okay.
And then no, it would not.